It's time for the final word in sports all across the state. You're listening to Sports Talk with your hosts, Bill Kornblut, Will Pelagic, and the Professor Tom Hayes. You've been waiting all day, so join the show now by calling 800-956-7266.
Pleasant good evening to you and yours, and welcome into Sports Talk, South Carolina Radio Network on this Friday the 13th day of July 2018, chatting to you about the world of sports in the Palmetto State, along with Professor Tom Hayes, yours truly, Will Pelagic, here with you. It's the last day of vacation, the last day that this seat to my left will be vacated. Actually, it will still be vacated for another week because he'll be in Atlanta for SEC Media Days. And Phil Kornblut returns Monday. We'll all be in place on Monday for SEC Media Days, which gets underway in Atlanta. Looking forward to the start of that. We'll hear from Commissioner Greg Sankey. We'll hear from Georgia. We'll hear from Kentucky, LSU, and, of course, Texas A&M, which, of course, will be very intriguing. The first SEC Media Days under their new head coach, Jimbo Fisher. Tuesday will be at the Reserve at Lake Kiowee as well, taking care of the proceedings over at Dabo Sweeney's annual media golf outing. We'll hear from him and also some of the assistant coaches. I'll get to reacquaint myself with my man, Crush Brent Venables, and maybe ask a couple of questions about the quarterback situation that Dabo Sweeney won't answer. And then we'll also have the ACC media kickoff on Wednesday and Thursday. And, of course, talk to the Coastal teams on Wednesday, the Atlantic teams on Thursday. Interesting, both South Carolina and Clemson's days to speak at their respective media events is Thursday. So Thursday is D-Day, if you will, for that. The 19th, we will hear from Will Muschamp, Dabo Sweeney, and the players and coaches that are a part of those two contingents. Contingent of you who want to talk to us is always open. 800-956-7266. Email talkback at sportstalksc.com. Find us on Twitter at SportsTalkSC and on Periscope at SportsTalkSC, as well as YouTube from our website, sportstalksc.com. Well, the news today involves basketball again. You know, that round thing, not the longer, melon-shaped thing, the basketball thing.
The spheroid.
The thing that we were talking about yesterday, the round one. It's orange, basketball. An in-state basketball prospect has left the state of South Carolina, and it has fans up in arms. Juwan Gary, Gray Collegiate. We've been following this story for you all week about how he was basically fixing to commit this week and had basically let a target date of Saturday and Sunday, but his family came in early to North Augusta where he was playing in the Peach Jam Classic. He decided to let the cat out of the bag this afternoon and say that he's committed to Avery Johnson and the Crimson Tide. Of course, this has people in the state a little miffed, a little peeved that another one inside the state has gone by the wayside. And you're wondering whether or not this is an epidemic, a trend, or, as I'm sure you will say, Professor Tom Hayes, something that in my mind, in your mind, I'm sure as well, is not as big a deal as people are making it out to be.
Well, I'm just thinking logically, and a kid wants to play. Obviously, he's mentioned that he would like to be a one and done. And you look at the guards that South Carolina has coming in, and they're freshman guards. One is 6'7", you have one 6'5", 6'4". And then you have a transfer who's sitting out a year, will be a junior next year. And then you look at the recruiting that's going on. Trey Hannibal, point guard, already committed for next year. You got 2 scholarships left.
Mm-hmm.
Your best big man will graduate. You need big people, and you only have 2 scholarships left. If one goes to another guard, then you can't recruit the big prize guard that everybody wants in James. And then you need to have room for a big man.
Mm-hmm.
So where's the room at the end for a guy like Juwan Gary? I just asked the question.
We will hear from Juwan at 6:30, a little bit after 6:30. He spoke to some assembled media. The state newspaper was down there talking to him, and we'll at least take a little bit of time to hear from him. But, the feeling I got, and I don't mean this as a disparaging type of thing to the player, but in my mind, I don't think the player necessarily is the kind of fit for a Frank Martin system, because he said that he believes he's a one-and-done prospect. I don't know if that's the kind of personality that Frank Martin wants to come in. And if Frank Martin thought he was a one-and-done prospect, or at least had the specter of being a one-and-done prospect, they wouldn't have left him alone in June, like according to Jawan telling us that they hadn't really heard from Frank and the South Carolina staff from that time. In my mind, that tells me they didn't want him. And Clemson kind of came in at the last minute in June, trying to probably get in his kitchen a little bit and talk shop with him. But once Avery Johnson, I don't know if these are delusions of grandeur that he put on him or whatever. I mean, but whatever pitch he threw out there, kid bought. And judging by the way he's talking, he wanted to leave the state. And I don't begrudge him for wanting to do that. Like, that's the thing. It's like people make like some kids who don't want to stay home where they are, that's a slight to the state or a slight to the community. Well, we have the preacher man who's the Clemson fan who's saying, oh, well, USC is horrible for the community. Maybe it's just as simple as the kid doesn't want to stay at home for school. He doesn't want to have all these people around him pressuring him. I think that, I didn't want to stay home for school. I know a lot of people, in fact, the majority of people who I basically attracted to and were with when I was in college were people who were from elsewhere. And that's a lot of there's a trailblazer spirit of some kids these days. And not everybody wants to stay in the same place and have the kind of life where they're basically tied to one place for their entire life. It's not a bad thing. It's not disparaging towards South Carolina. I think this basically came down to the fact that, at the end of the day, you just didn't want to be here. And that's not a bad thing.
And the key point is he just doesn't want to be here now. It could hit you later on as, I wish I was back somewhere. But it depends on the individual, because just as I was talking to a young lady years ago, she went away to school and her grades weren't that good. So she decided to come back to another school closer to home. Grades weren't good. She went to school 3 and she thrived. And she said, you know what I found out? It wasn't the schools. It wasn't where I was. It was me. It was me that was messing things up. So some of these kids, some have to get away from home to decide what direction they're going in. Others gravitate toward staying at home until they think they're mature enough to be turned loose. I mean, just like a Sindarius Thornwell stays at home, and now he's in the NBA in Los Angeles.
And I mean, this is a very deep crop. I mean, like you said, there's more in the kitty, so to speak. You can't land all 5 of these guys now. Okay, so it's not like there's not other guys you can pick up. I mean, Josiah James is still on the board. Christian Brown, Lower Richland still on the board. Malcolm Wilson of Ridgeview, although there might be some cooling on him. There's still plenty out there. And by the way, there's 49 other states that play basketball in this country. They don't have to all be from here. And because of the fact that people are just so obsessed with the closing down the borders and letting a 100 top 100 player from the state. I'm just telling you, this is so stupid. This is a stupid thing.
No, I really do have the feeling, though, if you're in the arguably the top conference in America,
ACC.
Yes, the ACC. I would have thought coming off of Sweet 16, Gary would have given more credence to Clemson. Or are you saying that Clemson also did not want him?
I'm saying that Clemson is dealing with the same kind of thing that South Carolina is. Their fans probably have delusions of the fact that run last year should provide an immediate return. And the fact remains, you got to have some more sustained success than just 1 year playing in the Sweet 16 in the second weekend. Which, again, that's the way this works. Like, this is not new. We've known that this is the way this works with college basketball.
But then again, of course, 2 guards decided to come back. Maybe if one of those would have left, Gary would have looked at Clemson a little bit harder.
The other thing. We'll come back. We're going to talk a little football. Peter Burns, SEC Network, will join us coming up to preview SEC Media Days coming up next week. We'll also hear from Jawan Gary at 6:30, big recruiting news, and also the golf and the NASCAR in the second hour, and your phone calls as well coming up here on Sports Talk.
Sports Talk is the sports talk show of Main Street, South Carolina. From the coast to the mountains, we cover it all.
Welcome back, Sports Talk South Carolina Radio Network. As we continue, we are just a couple of days away from the media circus that is SEC Media Days, moving to a new venue and a new location, the city of Atlanta. It's a shorter drive for our friend Peter Burns, who joins us now on our hotline to talk about what's going on next week in Atlanta. Pete, are you happy that we're in Atlanta this year as opposed to Hoover?
You know what? I mean, I always like Hoover in Birmingham. It kind of feels like home for the SEC, obviously, because I spend it feels like a month and a half there for the SEC baseball tournament every year. But you know what? I honestly think that SEC Media Days needed a little shot in the arm, guys. And I think that's what it comes down to. And I know a lot of people that are excited about it. It'll be interesting to see now. We're going to do kind of a summer fest. It'll be kind of a kickoff on Sunday. I think it comes at a perfect time in the fact that we've got so many brand new coaches. We've got a new venue because honestly, I don't know. I mean, you know, you guys know it. Last year it kind of felt a little dead. It kind of felt like a bunch of dead men walking, and guys knew that, hey, they may not be back the following year. And so I'm happy. It's nice and upbeat, and everybody's undefeated and new venue. So, yeah, it should be fun.
So I'm going to start right out of the gate. Week 2 provides for people in these parts a statement opportunity with South Carolina and Georgia meeting at Williams-Brice Stadium. The Bulldogs, of course, coming off a trip to the college football playoff final game, and South Carolina off of its first trip to a New Year's Day bowl in quite a while. Your thoughts on these two who will square off possibly for SEC East supremacy early on?
Yeah, I'm so excited about that. We talked about a bunch of different good games in the early part of the season on our radio show, and the one that I circled, I was like, if I could be anywhere, I mean, honestly, if I could talk to the people at College Game Day, I was like, you sure as hell better be at Williams-Brice Stadium for week 2, right? I mean, I think a Georgia team that's going to play Austin Peay and shouldn't have a whole lot of problems with them week 1. I think coming into there with Jake Bentley, with Debo coming back, the Sandstorm, the Space Odyssey, I mean, everything. I mean, I can't imagine a better venue that you're going to have than a pivotal SEC East squad and SEC matchup between those two. You know, I heard Danny Sheridan earlier this week on Feinbaum saying, oh, you know, Georgia's going to blow them out and stuff like that. I'm like, what are you talking about? Like, I just don't see a Will Muschamp team in the third season that he has out there, knowing Kirby's tendencies, knowing that, you know, Georgia is dealing with the losses of Lorenzo Carter and Roquan Smith and Nick Chubb and Sony Michel. I just don't see where the defense and the you know, running attack's going to come from Georgia to make this thing to be as one-sided as some people think it's going to be.
Yes, I did mean to mention at the outset your brand new venture, or at least not brand new, but somewhat new venture with SiriusXM and SEC this morning, where you and Marcus are breaking it all down. What do you think the perception is conference-wide about this South Carolina team? Because people here are very bullish about their chances. We're wondering, you know, after hearing what Danny Sheridan had to say, maybe not as bullish conference-wide as they might be here in Columbia.
I mean, again, I think what Danny said was absolutely way off basis. I mean, if I had to say, I mean, I think that's a pick-em game right now, simply for the fact of the thing that we talked about on our show this morning with Marcus, and Marcus knows because he played for Will, is that I saw it in the first year. The first year that Will took over South Carolina, I think the cover was pretty bare, but he still made the right choice to burn the red shirt off of Jake, and Bentley was fantastic. And I think he was able to piece together a game, or at least a game plan that got them to get into a bowl. I think year 2, listen, I don't think that was a 8-9 win type talent squad, but he found a way to get it done. And I think that's the one thing that I'll give Will that much credit for down in Columbia, is that he finds a way to piecemeal, and especially on defense, he knows how to kind of duct tape is kind of a strong, you know, statement, but he knows where his weaknesses are and how to mask them. And I think that's huge going against a team in Georgia, in which I frankly don't think they're going to be a national title contender like they were last year. So yeah, in long-winded way of saying, I think Danny Sheridan was dead wrong in his prediction.
Yeah, when you look at guys like Danny Sheridan and some of the other national pundits, it seems to me, Peter, that they're still thinking of Will Muschamp not learning from his mistakes, but he has. He's shown it, the moves he's made at South Carolina, and they will not let this Florida thing go. If he couldn't win at Florida, how in the world can he win at South Carolina? Well, sometimes things happen where coaches learn from their mistakes and they don't repeat them. And so I think So when is?
No, I mean, you're 1,000% right. I mean, the Will Muschamp that I knew at Florida versus the Will Muschamp that I sat in his office with Marcus Spears last spring is night and day. And I think Will is the first person to tell you that. Like, Will, anytime, listen, guys, like, I know it. The first time I was a radio show host, I got handed the keys. I'm like, oh, this is how it's going to go. I'm going to do this, and I'll be the greatest ever. And I got, punched in the mouth. And I'm like, I don't know what I'm doing. And it wasn't until I kind of understood it a little bit more to where I realized I'm like, okay, this is how this is supposed to go. And I think that's the thing with Will. I think Will's comfortable enough that in his kind of second go around that he learned what works and what doesn't work, and that he's not trying to be anybody that he's not. I've told that to Marcus. I've told it to other people around the conference that, like, I got a little baby girl. She's 8 months old, right? Like, she's not going to play football. But if I had a boy, I was like, if I could have him play for any coach in the conference, I'd choose Will Muschamp, because I think that Will's going to be hard, but he's also going to be fair. And I think that he's found a way to kind of mesh this talent and this roster together, and that's why I'm very bullish on what I'm going to see out of South Carolina.
The SEC Network will boast 45 hours of live programming from Atlanta, stemming, of course, with SEC Nation Live beginning Sunday at 6. You'll hear, of course, Peter's radio show simulcast in the morning as well on SEC Network, and of course, he joins us here on Sports Talk. Why is Florida getting all this love?
I think it's because a lot of people, want Florida to be the Florida that it was back with Spurrier and back with Urban. And I'll be honest with you, I think that they would have made a massive – I think Scott Strickland would have made a massive error in hiring Chip Kelly had that been the hire. I don't think that would have been the right fit. I don't think that Chip would have been a good fit for Gainesville. But I think the fact that they see Dan Mullen and what he's been able to do with what listen, I don't think it's a lie or anything like that. I think Dan will tell you that as well too. I think kind of 3-star talent in Mississippi State and how he's coached them to be 4-star and 5-star type guys. I think that a lot of people believe that now that Dan's going to be there in Florida and has that 4-star, 5-star talent capability, that it's going to come. I don't think it comes year one, guys, but I think that if I'm buying stock in teams, I'm buying some stock in Dan Mullen at Florida, because I think it's just the right fit.
Speaking of stock, Texas A&M's Board of Trustees and the powers that be put a lot of stock in Jimbo Fisher. And it seems to me, if we can use a movie theme, start off 5-0, finish 8-5. It was almost like watching Groundhog Day the last few years with the repeat performance by Texas A&M. How much pressure do you think, other than the salary he's making, that Jimbo has in this initial year in College Station?
Zero. I mean, here's the deal. I mean, I think Jimbo is in a perfect spot because, here's the deal. The check's going to cash regardless, right? Like, you're talking 10 years, $75 million. No matter what happens, they are in. And I think that's a brilliant move for Texas A&M, because if you look at this schedule this year, guys, they're going to start the season 2-2. I mean, I don't know how else to put it to Aggie friends and guys that listen to our show, is that I think that they lose to Alabama and I think they lose to Clemson. And a lot of the national media and a lot of people are going to say, oh, my goodness, my $75 million and they're 2-2. What's going on? Listen, that's to be expected. I think for Jimbo Fisher, Jimbo knows it's a new opportunity for him. And there's certain things when buying stocks, right? There's certain indicators. Mm-hmm. And like, hey, it's what you're, what kind of shares you have, what kind of profit, what kind of cash you have on hand. Those are indicators that say a stock is going to go up. The indicators in college football are the fact of, okay, do you have the facilities? Yes.
Certainly do. Peter, we have to run. I'm sorry we're up against a hard break, but thanks for joining us. Sports Talk, South Carolina Radio Network. We will, in the interest of full disclosure, push for some calls here. 800-956-7266. Email talkback, sportstalksc.com, on Twitter at SportsTalkSC. Just to kind of finish Peter's thought about the Aggies, there are a lot of what I would consider positive trending items when it comes to A&M, other than the fact that, you don't really have a quarterback that you would say that you absolutely 100% married to. Yeah, Nick Starkel had 60% of his passes completed last year. Maybe there's room for improvement there. He is only a sophomore. And you do have a lot of skill guys back, some skill guys on the defensive side of the football back. And yes, you have a coach who has now the first time he can utilize the full complement of a Texas footprint. Having said all that, previous guy had this access to the same footprint, and look what he did. So, I mean, in my mind, maybe a new voice is the right thing there, but, we're going to get a chance to see him twice this year. Clemson has him week 2, and, of course, South Carolina has him on the 13th of October. That we will have a very good idea about the future of the Aggies, who, of course, by the way, is South Carolina's permanent cross-division rival.
Mm-hmm. And it has nothing to do with football, but I think decadence can put you in a trap. And I think Texas A&M is stuck in a hole because of those fancy chandeliers they put in the new luxury boxes. Did you see some of those chandeliers that they have? Yeah. That is ridiculous.
That is the most, for lack of a better term, pimped out stadium in college football, bar none. I'm not saying it's the best. I'm not saying it's the loudest. I'm not saying it's the most passionate. But they got some unnecessary bells and whistles going on over there in College Station. And for a town, by the way, in College Station that is kind of dumpy. It's kind of dumpy. It's out in the middle of nowhere. There's really no easy way to get there either. 800-956-7266. Let's go to Walker, who's calling in Somerville, wants to talk a little Gamecock football. Hello, Walker. How are you?
Hey, man. How you guys doing today?
What's up?
Well, I'm actually a student at the University of South Carolina, and there's a lot of hype that's starting to creep in for this week 2 matchup when the big dogs from Georgia come down to Columbia to Williams-Brice. We got all this talent returning. We're really excited about this year, and I just wanted to know for myself and the fellow students at South Carolina that are about to get that place crazy, if you guys think we have a legitimate shot against Georgia this year.
Absolutely. Absolutely, I think they have a legitimate shot. It's in my mind, the thing about that game is that anything that South Carolina basically is out of their control, the timing of the game, the location of the game, all that stuff is in their favor. The things that they can't control. Now, everything they can control, obviously, it stands to reason there's a lot that they have to at least work on. But the things that, the out of control factor, it all skews to South Carolina.
Well, the key point is this is going to be a CBS's initial game of the SEC season. 3:30 kickoff. It's going to be hot.
I know people are mad about that too, which is like, again, guys, I'm sorry. You can't play all your games at night.
No,
no. And CBS, I've never heard people be so angry that we're going to be on CBS. It's like, guys,
that's what you want.
You want that exposure. You want CBS to be out the deal.
Remember what you did in what was it, 2010 when you beat Alabama on CBS?
Would you rather be the 11 a.m. Or 12 o'clock Jefferson Pilot game that used to have? I mean, come on. Let's be practical here.
Don't speak up. They still have those. They just shove them on the SEC network. But the key point is they stood toe to toe with Georgia. At their place last year when they had all guns blazing, including those 2 big hosses who really were the linchpin of them winning that football game. Yeah. Because every time South Carolina would have them pinned and it looked like they could get them on 3rd down, it would be 2nd and 8, 2nd and 9, and one of those big hosses would reel off a 10 or 12-yard run and move the sticks. And keep the football away from South Carolina's offense. I'm still wondering where those running backs are going to be this year. I know they got some talent, but they don't have the experience those guys had, and they were really slick last year, including picking up any type of blitzing linebackers to win the football game. As far as South Carolina is concerned, all they have to do is keep their head on their shoulders, get the running game going, get Jake Bentley going, and maybe Debo pulls off a big play or whatever. But they've got a lot of playmakers on this team that could exploit what I still say will be a neophyte for the most part, Georgia defense, because they lost a lot of talent last year on that defense.
It's odd, that game, they really at times when it looked like they could possibly get themselves back in it, shot themselves in the foot, especially having to settle for that field goal at 21-7 and make it 21-10. That was, I mean, you had first and goal, your first and 10 at the 13, and you can't do more than that. I mean, that to me, it stands to reason too, where, they even had the one drive too, where, they started at their one, got out of their own end zone and end up having to pound it back to Georgia. So much of all that game was predicated on missed opportunities. And I think that, South Carolina's offensive inefficiencies shouldn't be a problem this year.
No, it shouldn't be.
Shouldn't be.
And I'm saying here for the reason that you may not suspect. I think they're more athletic on the offensive line.
Yeah.
I think last year, if a tackle or defensive end made one move on some of those guys, it would be, Olay. That the Matador Cape would wave and they'd be in the backfield.
Mm-hmm.
I think with guys with a little bit more quicker feet, I think there would be a better defense.
A better
offensive
and the thing
line.
about South Carolina too, that they had to contend with at the end of the year was that they had so much of that shifting going back and forth between guys changing positions. You had Hutcherson going one way or the other, and Zach Bailey going in and out, and you didn't have Malik Young. I mean, it seemed like everybody and their brother was in and out of the offensive line last year. Week 2, you should be at full strength, provided that you get through Coastal Carolina unscathed. So you were going to have all the bullets in the gun. They didn't have a full gun. They didn't have a fully loaded gun when they went to Sanford Stadium, and they only lost by 14. So, the team that they brought into that game last year is not the team they're bringing in week 2, they being Georgia. So in my mind, yes, you have a better than even chance to beat Georgia at home. Now, will I, on this date, pick them to win that game? I will stop short of that. But what I will say is that there are ways for South Carolina in the opening game of the season. Again, apologies to the competition. They shot the clears out of the Sun Belt Conference. There are ways for me to be convinced that South Carolina could go in and be a, not favorite, but a within less than a touchdown underdog against Georgia if they have a good enough showing in the opening week. Now, will it mean anything? Probably not.
No.
But in my mind, you can do a lot of confidence building in that contest, despite the fact that it might hurt Joe Moglia's feelings.
No, I think probably in the opening football game, you really want to establish who the big dog is at the running back position.
Yes.
I'm going to give the guys, and I'm going to do that too for 2 reasons, Will. And it's one of those dangerous games I think all college football coaches do. And that is, they don't want to show their opponent all of what they got or what they may pull off against them. So I think South Carolina and, for the most part, Georgia in their opening games will be somewhat vanilla. And so for South Carolina being vanilla, that means, okay, we're going to find out in this football game who our big dog is as far as running back is concerned. Because I think a lot of them will get a lot of carries. And I think probably they will tell them this is your stage performance to see if you start against the Bulldogs.
So we talked earlier about Juwan Gary leaving the state and heading to Alabama to play his college basketball. We'll hear from him next when we come back on Sports Talk, South Carolina Radio Network.
Now back to Sports Talk, South Carolina's most listened to sports talk show for more than 30 years.
Welcome back, Sports Talk, South Carolina Radio Network. We spoke earlier in the program about Juwan Gary, who is headed to Alabama as 2019 college basketball prospect, choosing the Crimson Tide over South Carolina, Clemson, Virginia Tech, and NC State, who he had in his Final Five. He said earlier in the month, their style of play fits me well. They get out, they run in transition, and at the same time, they have to play defense. Funny, I don't know if anybody in the state knows anything about defense here. Do you know anybody in the state who knows anything about defense, bro?
He preaches defense.
Okay. Just wanted to make sure that was said. Here's a little bit of what Juwan Gary had to say to the assembled media at the Peach Jam Classic in North Augusta after making his commitment official. This is courtesy of the state newspaper.
I'm just talking about getting away from home. You know, I've been in South Carolina for all my life, you know, but getting out of state, playing for a different coach and different environment, it would be a good thing for me, a good fit for me. You know, no distraction up there, but at the same time, I got Ted back up there, one player for South Carolina, so me and him go at it every day, you know, in practice. So I just know I got somebody up there, watch my back, watch over me like a little bro. But at the same time, me and Coach Avery got that connection. Coach Petway, Coach Yao, everybody up there, Coach Stout, they all putting their force in me.
Did you see this coming, like in January, Alabama kind of coming through?
Oh no, I did not see it coming. I've been telling my high school, I'm like, dang, I wish Alabama just come through one time. Next, you know, like a couple weeks after that, like Alabama just said, we want you up here. I'm like, yes sir. So took that visit, we just felt home. Me and my parents, we just like the vibe they gave us. You know, everything they talk about was a good talk to them. Coach Avery broke it down. How he would push me every day. You know, he been in the league for 16 years. He won an NBA championship with the Spurs. So, you know, him being a coach and being an NBA player, he really learned a lot from him.
What did you talk to all your other coaches, your finalists at the end to kind of let them know, and kind of what was maybe their response?
I called Coach Petway last night. I called Coach Avery this morning. He said, that's the best decision for me. You know, he gonna come to every game to me. He gonna treat me like one of his players right now. But at the same time, he also gonna push me too. I was gonna let me know the good and the bad.
I know you talked about kind of you didn't feel any pressure to stay in state, but looking back on it, what you think you got out of kind of South Carolina's recruitment and meet with Coach Martin and them over the years?
I got a lot from you. You know, staying home could be a good fit. You know, everybody, all your family down there give you the support you really need. Like right now, people support me in high school coming back home. But you know, you got a lot of stuff going in South Carolina. You know, the basketball gonna stop one day. So you know, you always go back home, have a job. They always got jobs set up for you. But at the same time, staying home, you know, got all your friends, your family all there. They can stretch you too. But at the same time, I'm gonna stay focused. You know, get to that next level. You know, freshman year I could be a one and done. 2 years, 3 years, it really don't matter. But I'm really trying to get to the NBA level.
Is that your goal, to be a one and done?
Yeah. That's really my goal right now. You know, that's working hard at right now. So every day I work hard, trying to be that player to be a one and done.
Describe this process as well. You know, trying to pick a school. I mean, has it been stressful or has it been rather easy because you know exactly what you want?
It's been stressful, you know, for a couple of months now, but at the same time, I just been sitting back, kicking back, you know, just let the process go, you know. Coach be calling me, you know, but I'm trying to be disrespectful. I answer the phone, we talk to coaches every day. But at the same time, it's been frustrating me and my parents, you know, calling their phone every day. But at the same time, I was like, okay, this is going to be the best decision for me. So I just thought about it, sat in my room every day, just go over the process, pray to God, you know, just see what's going to be the best decision for me.
You talked about yesterday your relationship with Sedarius and what he said to you. Have you talked to him since? You said you talked to him on Tuesday?
Yes, sir. He actually told me, he like, well, wherever I go, he gonna have my support. You know, me and him, he be coming to my hospital like basically every day, working out, playing with the guys. So, you know, me and him just like this, we stay together. Okay, he was talking about at the same time. He played for Team United 1 year. So, you know, me and him have a good connection. So he really don't care where I go to, but he also is my supporter.
It's Juwan Gary. Analysis. Discuss.
No, as I said before, I just looked at it logically and say from a roster standpoint, this might be the best fit for him as far as if he wants to play. Because I'm saying South Carolina's got some guards, but then again, I looked at Alabama, they got about 3 guards, and 2 or 3 of those may be returning. So it won't be easy because he's got some guys in front of him at his position. You know, some of the irony here is, well, I mentioned a couple of players. Point guard out of Irmo years ago. I want to say, was the 90s? I'm getting old now. Marvin Orange went to Alabama.
Right.
Another guy, excuse me, I can't remember the college he went to, who incidentally came back to South Carolina as I think a strength coach for the basketball team.
Right.
He played basketball at Alabama. Darby Rich was another guy. And Avery Johnson.
Yes.
By the way, coached at Southern University by a guy named Ben Jobe, who was the head coach at South Carolina State and assistant under Frank McGuire at the University of South Carolina and an assistant under an advisor for Bobby Crimmins.
Well, this is the other thing and I'm going to be very, very careful with the way I said this, because people are getting all up in arms about how, this is another in-state prospect. It goes by the wayside. It's not like these guys are going elsewhere and turning into, NCAA most outstanding players in the Final Four or NBA superstars. Like, seriously, looking at the 2015 class, the best guy to come out of that squad, P.J. Dozier. Guess where he went? South Carolina. And the other guy in that school, in that class, would be Tevin Mack, who's already transferred once.
From Texas. Well, actually, he committed to Shaka Smart at VCU. And one of those dangerous things that I would tell a player, watch yourself when you do this. Then he got the gig at Texas, and he followed the coach. And
the rest were either taken by in-state schools or just didn't go at all. You mentioned Sadiq Keita, who was a 2016 commit, didn't stick. In that class, Carter Diarra went to Kansas State. That's not necessarily something that you're necessarily missing, I would say. Eli Wright, who has already had to transfer once, went from Mississippi State to St. John's. A.J. Oliver, who went to Clemson. So that's one you got. 2017, Clyde Trapp goes to Clemson. We've still yet to see him reach his potential. Mamadou Diarra, Carter's brother, going to Cincinnati. Are you upset about that one? Maybe. I don't know. Jalik Felton, North Carolina, is one that people were reasonably upset about. But now the news comes out today that he's going to play overseas in Slovenia. So
he made it quickly about his junior year in high school. He was following his uncle to North Carolina.
Exactly. And that was going to be one that was hard to get anyway as a result of that. Nicholas Claxton went to Georgia. Darnell Rogers went to Dunk City. And Jason Cudd went to where? South Carolina.
Now, Nicholas Claxton's dad went to Georgia.
Speedy.
And he was from Georgia. So
Speedy Claxton's kid is in college now. That makes me feel old now.
Well, I don't think it was Speedy Claxton. It was another Claxton.
Oh, the other Claxton.
Yes, another Claxton.
Okay.
His dad, he and his dad are pretty much the same height. So it was an inside guy.
Okay.
But
the 2018 class, obviously, people are talking about, Zion Williamson, Aaron Neesmith out of Porter Gouge, Sharon Wright, DJ Burns, all these guys who were going elsewhere. Jimmy Nichols, who didn't even get a look, is going to Providence, the Big East. But again, at the same time, where are these guys going to play? Who are these guys going to play? And that's the other thing is, like, DJ Burns is going to go to Tennessee. It's not like DJ Burns is going to, all of a sudden turn into a first-round draft pick. Like, these guys are all developmental players other than Zion.
Well, the key point that I'm looking at right now is, as we look at it,
Aaron Neesmith's going to Vanderbilt, for Bryce Drew. You're going to finish in the bottom third of the conference.
People look at it and then they see an epidemic because if they've been in the state for a long time. But the key point is not the epidemic. The key point is I'm looking at coaches who doing everything they can honestly to recruit guys they want in state. And we've seen that Brad Brunell and Frank Martin will do what they can to get a guy to stay in state. But the key point I want basketball fans to realize is when they look at both of these coaches are some of the few I've seen that when the guys want to go out of state, they got another plan involved. And if they have to go out of state to find guys that want to play for their teams, they'll do it.
And I think Frank Martin has shown very much that he's not afraid to do that. A couple of big recruiting notes for baseball. USC got a pair of top 100 prospects for the 2020 class. Outfielder Josh Schuler of Georgia, Lucas Cook, two-way player out of Knoxville, Tennessee. And also in recruiting, Travon Walker, Thomaston, Georgia. Great article from Korn on him at SportsTalkSC.com. Still has USC and Clemson among his final five, along with Georgia, Auburn, and Alabama. Says he'll take official visits at his other favorites after already taking one to USC, hoping to make his decision around midseason. Check out our recruiting online at SportsTalkSC.com. On Twitter, use the hashtag STRecruiting. Let's go birdies and bogeys across the state of South Carolina. George Bryan joins us from the Quad Cities next.
Unlimited.
2 of Sports Talk up next with your hosts Phil Kornbluth, Logic, and the Professor Tom Hayes. Don't leave us hanging. Join the show, 800-956-7266.
Sports Talk South Carolina Radio Network on this Friday, the 13th, July 13th, 2018, chatting to you about what's going on across the state of South Carolina, along with Professor Tom Hayes. Will Polaczek here with you as we get you ready for the weekend, and they are heading towards the weekend at the John Deere Classic in the Quad Cities. Want to at least put one more recruiting note in the hopper. The Gamecocks did get a commitment today on the baseball diamond. 2020 prospect Magdiel Cotto of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, left-handed pitcher, plays for Bethel Park in Pittsburgh. Number 97 overall lefty in the class. The third 2020 pickup since last night. Again, Josh Schuler and Lucas Cook, who both committed last night. He is the 12th member of the recruiting class for South Carolina baseball. So a good pickup for them. Leaderboard at the John Deere Classic has Michael Kim ahead at 16 under par. Shot 8 under earlier today and shooting 8 under today as well. So he's still on the course on hole 14. So he is at 16 under par, 8 under yesterday, 8 under so far today with 3 holes to play, or at least 4 holes to play now that I see. David Hearn, 12 under par. He is in the clubhouse with the lead at shooting 66 today, 64 today, 66 yesterday, pardon me. The 18-hole leader, Steve Wheatcroft, had another good day. He was at 12 under par for the tournament, 68 shot today. Johnson Wagner also in that tie for second. Among the local notables, Scott Brown is at 4 under par, still on the course, 2 holes to play. He sits currently 12 off the lead. Sam Saunders at 3 under par, as is Bill Haas at 3 under par. Jonathan Bird at 1 under. Kyle Stanley is at +3. Wesley Bryan is at +4. William McGirt is at +5. And as with that, we bring in George Bryan, who joins us for a little birdies and bogeys across the state of South Carolina. And George is in the Quad Cities at the John Deere Classic. George, thank you so much for joining us. How are things?
Oh, it's beautiful here. What a wonderful community. For those who hadn't been here, it's way better than I visualized. It's the folks are wonderful. The golf course is a lot of fun, but it has edge. These guys are really good. I'm sitting there looking at that leaderboard, and to sit there, I'm watching golf, and I'm watching Zach Johnson, Steve Stricker, and the group in front, obviously Wesley, and the group in front includes Harold Varner, and he's at 10 under. And then I look at this, it seems like Michael Kim and David Hearn and Steve Wheatcroft, they might be playing a different place because what I'm seeing looks pretty tough, but they're making it look easy, really easy.
It's weird. So, we mentioned Wesley's round today. He's at +4, as we said. He shot 71 yesterday, and it seemed like he felt like he had left some opportunities out there. I'm guessing some similar sentiments showed by him today.
Yeah, but the golf ball's not bouncing too good, and the hole is not accepting. So he's at this point he's focusing probably more, even though he's got a hole left, is next week, and he will not make that trip across the pond to the British Open. And I tell you what, I'm watching that Scottish Open on TV. That kind of gets my heart beating right there. But Wesley won't be making that trip. I'm also watching. It's pretty cool. Tommy Gainey snuck back on the right side of the cut line, and I'm in the clubhouse right now. I hadn't walked over to talk to him, but Tommy's trying to outrun an injury right now and get his game back. So I'm pulling for Tommy Gainey. It looked like, I think I heard you say Kyle Thompson was on the wrong side of it, and Jonathan Bird. Don't know if they have any holes left, but pulling for those guys, no doubt.
Yeah, Tommy's currently at 3 under par, and so he is still on the correct side of the projected cut, which is at 3 under par. So that's good news for him. And you mentioned some of the other guys. You know, Francesco Molinari, who had the win at the Quicken Loans National in D.C. He continues to have a good showing. He's at 11 under par, 5 off the lead. He's somebody who's kind of an off the beaten path guy who's continuing to show some good stuff.
Hey, you can't always tell about TV, but his driving game is spectacular, and this is a very difficult driving course, despite what the commentators might say or what it looks like on TV. It is very difficult, and he is a great driver of the golf ball. wouldn't be surprised at all for him to get hot and do again what he did at TPC Avenel. He's and his putting is on, and these greens are just perfect right now for making putts. Unfortunately, it didn't work out that way for Wesley, and so far, be kind of interesting. His biggest asset, in my opinion, is moving forward. So hopefully he gets this one behind him as soon as he has in the past. Like when he's roughed it in the past, he can move to the next tournament as good as anybody I've ever seen. So, but Molinari, he's one of my favorites. I love watching him play golf, and wouldn't be surprised if he got hot this weekend.
Well, George, we know you're in Illinois, but you're teetering on the Iowa border, where it's either been flash flooding or baking hot for the people in Iowa. How are the greens holding up in this weather?
Well, the greens are absolutely perfect, Pro. And you're right. Not only am I on the border, I am on the Mississippi River. I am actually staying on the Iowa side in Bettendorf at the Isle of Capri Casino.
I was going to ask you if you made your way over to that casino.
I am not hanging out in that casino. I'm just staying there.
Gotcha.
But it is, I promise. But hey, the greens are holding up. The greens are absolutely perfect here. Absolutely perfect. This is a wonderful event. Community gets behind it. There's 2,000 volunteers here, people that give their time and energy and effort, resources, and it's really a spectacular atmosphere. I'm so glad I was able to make the trip.
Of course, you mentioned the Open Championship, which comes your way to Carnoustie. People remember the Jean Van de Velde very, very tough 18th hole that he had, couple of opens back, and obviously links style golf is something of almost a different type of game. What do you think as we kind of look ahead to what we will see here in the next coming days here? What is the key to winning on a links-style course such as Carnoustie and you see across the pond?
That's all about golf ball control and imagination. And it is a completely different style of golf, and I would equate it. Watching that tennis today, I'll tell you what, men, I know this is not golf, but tennis, did Anderson or did the other
Anderson beat Isner 26-24 in the final set.
Well, my point is the grass courts are much different than the clay, and the clay is different than the hard courts, and British Open golf is as different as those courts are and requires way more creativity, and you absolutely must control your golf ball in the wind, but also on the ground. So these guys around here at the Deer, all they're doing is having to control their ball through the air. It stops almost exactly where it lands. And so over there, your ball hits the ground and rolls, so you have to anticipate. So it's a completely different style of golf. I love it. I actually prefer it. Too bad we got into all the watering of the golf courses and the ball stops. No, that's just my preference. But I look forward to it. I actually like watching the Scottish Open as well.
I would say, how have you fared over there when you've played?
Until I adjusted, it completely defeated me. It destroyed me. It takes a while to adjust. I took about 6 or 8 rounds before I got the hang of it. But when I did, it definitely favors me. You don't have to hit your ball so high over there, and it rolls all over the place. You have to have an incredible short game, and so that's in my heart, but also in my wheelhouse. So I love it. I can't wait till next week.
We appreciate the time as always, GB. Getting you obviously stay away from the slots over there at the Isle of Capri, and hopefully you and Wesley can regroup and keep your eyes set on the next tournament.
Do my best. Talk to you next week. See him high, but shoot him low.
That's George Bryan III joining us here on Sports Talk. I tell you what, man, loving watching that Cabbage, watching them play. You know, I used to have an overnight job, and I used to love getting the opportunity to see that Open Championship. I would just turn it on and just keep it on. It was fantastic. Great entertainment. You not so much.
Now, Carnoustie is not the one where you have that hole where somebody's down in the ditch.
Yes, that is the one.
Okay, I thought it was. I wasn't sure.
They got that burn. That's where Van de Velde was.
Looks like David Duval left his game in that hole that day when he struggled.
This is the place to talk Tigers, Gamecocks, and more. Sports talk across the state on the South Carolina Radio Network.
Sports Talk South Carolina Radio Network. We're brought to you by Founders Federal Credit Union. This is big. For the first time in 5 years, the 5-year certificate for Founders Federal Credit Union has reached its highest point. You should check out foundersfcu.com to take advantage of this today. If you need a quick getaway or relaxing stay at a beach resort, a vacation loan from Founders can make things happen as well. Apply online at foundersfcu.com/vacation. If you're not a Founders member, visit relaxjoinfounders.com to see if you qualify, for membership, if I could talk on this on this Friday. We also would like to we've made a very big deal and a very deserved big deal about this over the last couple of months, but our good friend Tim Beret, his last official day of duty as Clemson's sports information director and historian extraordinaire was today. He said on his last day at Clemson, I want to thank former President Jim Barker for the painting he made of Death Valley, a view from the practice fields where I spent a lot of hours the last 40 years. Dr. Edwards and Father Hesburgh are smiling down, and certainly he is very beloved by the folks at Clemson. He will still continue his duties working for the Clemson Magazine and also for the Clemson men's basketball radio job, but of course he will be dedicating much of his time now to the fine folks at NBC Golf. And again, we join many others who have wished congratulations and listed debt of gratitude as well to him for all the help that he has had. And good friend of mine, Ross Taylor from the University of Missouri's School of Journalism, and most recently working in the Media Relations Department of the Washington Redskins, will take over for him and be installed in that post on Monday. He'll be helping us out at the Clemson Media Golf outing on Tuesday, and of course at ACC's Media Kickoff, which is Wednesday and Thursday. We'll have full coverage of all that for you here on Sports Talk, as well as SEC Media Days, where Phil will be stationed to talk about all the SEC media happenings Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. Again, both the Gamecocks and Clemson have their media availabilities on Thursday, so we'll be more than tuned in for that. And also on Monday, our brand new media affiliation with the fine folks at WCCP 105.5 The Roar in Clemson. Very, very excited about that. Both Korn and I made separate radio appearances on their station, on their local programming. They're going to have 15 hours of local programming on a radio station. That is unbelievable, including the 2 hours which we will be providing to them. Again, we are being tape delayed on that program, so nothing changes for you who listen to us on a regular basis here on Sports Talk. But if you want to listen to us in Clemson, we'll be on from 7 until 9. The first hour of our program will be heard from 7 until 8. Hour 2 will be from 8 until 9. So be sure to make that note when you're driving through the upstate. 105.5 The Roar is where you can have us. They're also available on TuneIn Radio, as are most of our affiliates here across the state. If you need a list of affiliates, we have it on our website, SportsTalkSC.com, for any of your travels in the state. Or if you're listening to us on the internet, you can do so on TuneIn Radio. Use our friends 100.7 The Point, our Columbia affiliate, which never preempts us, and also our little Periscope, which we have here. You can check out Pro, Phil, and myself when he's here, of course, and be sure to look at that for us to get anything you might. There's no excuse when it comes to how you can catch us here on Sports Talk. You know, we talked about this at the end of the show yesterday, and I wanted to bring it back up just because I found it funny, is that the two of the men with the third shortest odds to win the Heisman Trophy are Tua Tagovailoa and Trevor Lawrence, two players who have 1/2 plus overtime of college football experience in their belt, combined between the two of them. The other two are Jonathan Taylor and Bryce Love. Those are the two who have shorter odds. Outside of Lawrence and Tagovailoa, it's Jake Fromm, Khalil Tate of Arizona, J.K. Dobbins of Ohio State, Jared Stidham of Auburn, Justin Herbert, Oregon State, and Trace McSorley, Penn State, Will Greer, West Virginia. Kelly Bryant is at plus 2,000 odds to win the Heisman Trophy. It's funny how your backup is plus 900 and your starting quarterback is plus 2,000. Do they think? Do they know something in Vegas we don't know, or is it just they're just trying to get ahead of the curve with Trevor?
Yeah, that's what they're trying to do. This kid's got a lot of hype, but it's something when a guy it just comes in cold, especially a quarterback. I can remember back in the day, I guess the freshman that really freaked people out, and you thought he may have a chance at the Heisman, but that was before people would vote for a sophomore or freshman for the Heisman. That was Herschel. And that happened to be the year, I think, that George Rogers won it. And then Herschel, his sophomore year, didn't win it because Marcus Allen decided to go crazy at Southern California, and he won it. Then, of course, Herschel won it, I think, his junior year before he defected to the USFL.
In my view, looking at Clemson, I know people have already sharpied in 12 wins. Like that to me, I don't want to say it's short-sighted because I think I have the same feeling. I mean, it's hard to imagine them not playing in the college football playoff in some capacity.
Especially with that defensive line. I keep telling you, man, if you got a good quarterback and a stout defensive front, a lot of your work is done.
But here's my only question. The last image we have of Clemson is looking completely inept against Alabama. Like, the first time against Alabama.
That's not the first time somebody's looked inept against that Alabama defense.
But I'm saying this. They held their own the first time around.
Yes.
They won the second time. They did not do so this last time. I'm just saying, and I'm just wondering, is there a possibility that off of that we see in the regular season some repeat performance anywhere of that?
No.
None?
None
in your mind. Even if they pull the trigger and go with Trevor. Or even if they stay with Kelly Bryant.
I wouldn't see it happen again because I just think they got a hold of an Alabama team that thought that the previous Clemson regime, the previous team stole something that was theirs.
Yes.
And they wanted it back. And it's funny how suddenly your dander gets up when somebody stole something from you and they're standing right across from you. And what do? You want to grab them by the scruff of the neck and shake them.
And I'm not saying you're wrong, and I'm not even saying it, but I mean, how many times do we see programs in college football that are preordained or preordained to basically be there, almost basically to a point where you could start etching their name in a trophy? How many times do you actually see that actually come to fruition? It's not often.
No, not really. But the thing about
that's the only thing that scares me.
Yeah, the thing about it though is when you look at teams like Clemson and Alabama, let's face it, since we've had this new system, they've been there, and so there is almost ingrained in you, especially with the upperclassmen, of course, is the fact been there, done that, and the other intricacies around you surrounding that, all the esoteric stuff doesn't faze you. Whereas the other teams who may not have been there or have not been there in a while, those players are jumping into a situation they haven't seen before. And that makes them uncomfortable. And that gives Clemson and Alabama a built-in advantage, in my opinion.
I'm just worried. I don't know. I feel like sometimes there's possible to have too much hype around the team. And I'm wondering if there's any kind of complacency that develops. And maybe the Alabama loss last year rids any of that complacency. Maybe the Syracuse loss last year rids some of that complacency. And maybe Clemson comes out full bore and wanting to, take prisoners. But at the same time, I still have a lingering bit of just, what happens if, say, Kelly has a bad half and then they go to Trevor in the second half and he can't rescue him. And it's like you're trying to, put holes in the boat and maybe even start seeing ghosts out there. Again, I'm seeing the scenario of how it could happen. I don't think it will, but at the same time, it could very well given
Only if
its
Clemson
history.
gets bored.
They can get bored. We're not bored. We'll do NASCAR next.
The latest on this weekend's race is around the corner. The full Monty on NASCAR is next. This is Sports Talk.
Gentlemen of NASCAR head to Kentucky this week as they get themselves ready for that. Martin Truex Jr. has the pole for the Quaker State 400, which we will get to in a moment. But first, wanted to at least peruse what happened at Daytona. As we go to the full Monty on NASCAR, MontyDutton.com joining us here on the program. And Monty, your thoughts on Eric Jones winning at Daytona? I know you say these restrictor plate rates are very much kind of crapshoots and that anybody can win, and it's a much different skill set than actual racing. But we see a different winner, which is something might be a breath of fresh air to the sport.
Well, Eric Jones has a good skill set. He was rookie of the year last year, and he's probably one of the people, when you look at first-time winners, who would be most in line to do so. You know, he drives for Joe Gibbs, and so he might be a little bit late. Of course, there's a lot of people waiting for victories this year, but he was a fitting winner, but it was even by Daytona standards, and even more, let me use a big word, cacophonous race. It was full, and I got thinking about, why was it so wild? Why was it so out of control? And I really think that, you know, Daytona is a race where 3/4 of the field could win the thing. And that's probably, given this season, their only chance. So they drove like crazy people. And it showed there were 6 multi-car crashes. Ricky Stenhouse has been under tremendous fire by playing a large role in 3 of them. And then he eventually, you know, he caused 3 wrecks, or at least you might make another argument in 1 of them, but he got away from each one of them with almost no damage. And so there are a lot of people who are thinking, oh, if that, you know, if that son of a gun wins this race, it's going to be awful. But he ended up getting the big payback by being in a wreck that wasn't his fault, because the car's tire went down in front of him, I think. And so he had nowhere to go. So it was sort of poetic justice. But I don't know. I guess it's an exciting race as long as nobody gets hurt. But it really was cringeworthy.
Yeah, I mean, it's weird. I find it interesting how a race like Daytona kind of at least takes care of the fact that we don't have any real haves and have-nots in NASCAR, but it really just kind of gives you a sense of how big the gap is between the haves and the have-nots when they go to the intermediate tracks and, of course, the tracks like Kentucky that we'll see this week.
Daytona is wonderfully democratic.
That's funny. That's good. It's funny, you know. That's what they said about fly balls too in the movie Bull Durham, right?
Yeah, I think that's right. Yeah. Yeah, it was a crazy spectacle. They had fireworks, but the best fireworks in that race were the ones that weren't fired over the turns.
And the one thing that I find interesting is that it will be Jones and Truex together on the front row in reverse position that they finished in Daytona, and a couple of other big performers, Larson in practice as well, even though he wasn't at least among the top finishers in the pole qualifying. Harvick 3rd, Keselowski 4th, and Kyle Busch 5th. Who stands out to you as we get ready for Kentucky?
Truex stands out for me because he wasn't all that fast in practice. He didn't run much in qualifying setup, and then he went out and won the pole. And he has dominated a race that he didn't wind up winning at that track. So my hunch is stronger than usual. And while it's boring for someone like me to pick the pole winner, that's what I'm going to do.
As far as the Kentucky Speedway is, again, it was obviously people call the growth of the cookie cutter tracks, but is there any uniqueness to this speedway?
A little bit. It's probably unusually wide. It's I think I've been to Kentucky one time, and I vowed I would never go back because it's the worst weekend. It's the worst weekend. The first race, I was really excited, new track, new place to go to, and it was a disaster. They weren't ready for that kind of crowd, and they hadn't had to worry about a crowd like that since, because a lot of people left that saying, "Oh, Madge, never again will we make this mistake." And I was in dead stopped in traffic at 4 a.m. after that race. And it was a miserable weekend. I spent a month there one weekend. And but now, I think 7 years removed, I sort of feel guilty. I sort of feel like I wish I could give that track another chance, because now, of course, I really do think that there are two places on the circuit where the fall off is, in a sense, eminently deserved. I think that Indianapolis's death knell almost was that fans have never forgiven them for the nightmarish race where the tires weren't any good and they were popping like balloons.
Right.
And the track, and I don't think the fans have ever come back. And I don't think the fans of Kentucky have ever come back after the miserable time on the grand opening. I think you have an area where people are excited. We've never seen anything like this. And they said, oh, we don't ever want to see anything like this again. So I think that they've paid a big price for how they botched the first race there.
Well, the thing about Indianapolis is that, I don't want to necessarily say it's a cash grab, but I mean, it's an eyeball grab for a lot of folks, at least who are inside of NASCAR. I think they now that they have the race there with the Brickyard, it's almost like you can't even imagine it not being there. Do you think NASCAR has spread its load too thin? I mean, do you think that there might need to be some more contraction of these tracks?
I think the difficulty is the tracks that people most complain about are the most lavish facilities. And I think that some of those tracks, if they don't have two races, they go under. I mean, a racetrack is a big lavish facility and it makes all its money in a couple of weekends. I think that the only real solution is not to get rid of tracks, but is to make the racing at those tracks better, because the so-called cookie cutter track, Charlotte Motor Speedway, was not always a boring race. I've seen many great races. I think it was very encouraging at Chicagoland, because I think there were signs it was genuinely a good race in the sense that races used to be. And I keep saying this, and I think sometimes I go right over the head of people. But what the sport is missing is not in statistics. It's in dicing for the lead. Most of the time when somebody passes somebody, he pulls away. And, he comes up more time, gets by, and he's gone. The race at Chicago on a cookie-cutter intermediate track was a genuinely exciting race. And at the end of it, Kyle Busch and Kyle Larson, two people who will just impress you just visually more than anybody else on the circuit. I've said before that some drivers are smooth and some drivers are spectacular. And those are the two most spectacular. And so I think that was a good sign. And with Daytona last week, even though I thought it was something of a travesty, I think many people would want to watch that again. So maybe the sport's building some momentum. And NBC has taken over TV. They've gotten a lot better reviews. People are enjoying Dale Earnhardt Jr. in the booth. So I think it's sort of the first upbeat move in a while. And NASCAR has a chance to make some headway again if they don't botch things again. But if I were betting, I would say they botch things. But, yeah.
Last in our final couple seconds here, you are picking Truex. I'm gonna let you give you a chance to change your mind if you want, but sounds like you're firm with Truex.
I'm never firm. I usually think of it when you ask me. This time I thought about it. I'm sticking with Truex.
Well, appreciate the time as always, Monty. We'll chat with you next week, and look forward to watching the race this weekend.
Well, I'll enjoy it. Look forward to talking to you. Bye now.
Bye-bye. That's Monty Dutton joining us here on Sports
Yes,
Talk.
I remember that they only had one exit to go to the track when they started the first race in Kentucky. That's why everybody was stuck, and one exit to get out.
It's like Giant Stadium. I spent a month there 1 week too. Imagine how bad it is after they lose, because it happens quite often. We're back to close up shop after this.
These guys, they never sleep. Check them out on the web at SportsTalkSC.com. Now, more of Sports Talk on the South Carolina Radio Network.
Final segment of the week. Remember, we will be all back reconvened together. Corn, myself, the professor, will be live from SEC Media Days in Atlanta. We'll be getting you ready for what's going on there. We'll hear from Commissioner Sankey. We're going to hear from Kentucky, LSU, A&M. Tuesday, we'll hear from Georgia, Ole Miss, Arkansas, Florida, as well as Steve Shaw, the SEC coordinator of football officials, Mississippi State, Tennessee, Alabama, and Missouri on Wednesday. And then Thursday, we will have the opportunity to hear from Auburn, Vanderbilt, and, of course, South Carolina. The way the ACC will do it, they'll do the coastal teams on Wednesday, the Atlantic teams on Thursday, so that will include Clemson. So we'll have Clemson's coastal opponents trying to work on seeing to possibly get either Miami or Virginia Tech also to give us some work as well. And then, of course, we'll have all the Atlantic opponents, including Clemson. Clemson bringing Cleveland Farrell, Mitch Hyatt, and, of course, head coach Dabo Sweeney involved there.
Where's the quarterback?
He'll be. Which one? Do you want the one with the hair? You want the one with the hair? Or you want the one with the hair? We talk about the hair or the hair, because they both kind of have hair.
Who won? Who came first? The tortoise or the hare?
It's the first, slow and steady, steady and slow.
The underlying theme
is in. I would say the underlying theme is insecurity.
Oh, okay.
What's your underlying theme?
Well, no, I'm trying to see what the underlying theme of both, corrals, the press corps and everything, because I want to figure out by looking at what questions are asked and what the body language looks like with each coach or whatever, to figure out if there is some malaise in each conference. In the ACC, the malaise would be Clemson fatigue. SEC, will we see any, kind of traces of Alabama fatigue?
I'm wondering how much, because, it usually is around this time of the year where we will see Nick Saban kind of, get ornery.
Yeah, because he wants to get in the put his game face on, so to speak.
So I'm guessing by some point we'll see a Saban ornery situation. I'm interested to see the first timers. I'm interested to see how Chad Morris adjusts with Arkansas. I'm also Jimbo Fisher knows this routine, having been in a high profile program at Florida State, so this won't faze him. But I'm looking at some of these others, new different press corps for Florida with Dan Mullen, and the one that strikes me as interesting is Ole Miss. Remember when we had Neil McCready on to talk Ole Miss, and he sounded like, not only from him but from some of the other people, that he thinks that Ole Miss kind of, I don't want to say sandbag that hire, but it almost seems like that they made the convenient choice. So I'm wondering if, he does get another year of basically, I don't want to say a year free, but the fact that they can't compete for a conference championship this year, and because of the scholarship reductions too, there's obviously that involved as well. But I'm wondering, what kind of curve he'll be graded on. I mean, I think, even a coach like Barry Odom at Missouri, who probably stacks in the best team he's had, just because of the fact that he will have Drew Lock, who comes into a year where he's projected to be a very high draft pick. Tennessee, obviously, brand new coaching staff there. There's a lot of intrigue, and like Peter Burns said with us, there's fresh meat in the SEC. I feel like the ACC media days might kind of go like the SEC's last year, because, like I said before, it seems like this whole darn thing is preordained to be in Clemson's hands. We shouldn't even play the darn games.
Well, I think probably you will see some questions answered where people are hoping that there's someone who will step up to the plate and verbally say they're ready to challenge Clemson. And if you see anybody, I think that will be interesting. I also want to see if Jimbo Fisher actually is relishing going to Texas A&M, or or has he really undergone just a brief midlife crisis and needed to get out of Tallahassee, and College Station was the place to go?
Well,
not the fact that he's making $7.5 million a year for 10 years.
Well, it was Feinbaum who said that that Dabo Swinney basically convinced, not convinced, but basically Dabo Swinney was so dominant at the ACC, it caused Jimbo Fisher to leave Florida State to go to Texas A&M. I don't know how true that is. I still say your best avenue to a college football playoff is in the ACC if you're a team of any elite record or elite prominence.
That's why Florida State joined the ACC instead of when the SEC first gave them the invitation. They turned it down.
They don't want to play Alabama every year because that probably would make that happen because you do realize that Florida State is just southeastern Alabama now.
Well, I would think probably it would be great because Bobby Bowden was a guy who relished Alabama, even though he went to Samford. He was an Alabama guy. In fact, there's that old rumor that when Alabama's job opened years ago, and I think maybe he was in his late 50s at the time. You know why I'm here? Are we going to talk, or y'all looking for somebody else? And apparently, Alabama people, said, "Okay, we'll see you in Tallahassee," because of course he didn't get the job, but he didn't think he needed the interview with his record at Florida State.
Do you think it matters who comes out of the Coastal for Clemson? Like, do you think they're looking? I'm almost curious about Virginia Tech because I know you're not. I just know Miami got so badly exposed last year by Clemson.
Well, they had let's face it now. Both of their top receivers were out. And their quarterback was sort of, like a pitcher who can't get his curveball over.
Right.
And so he was not playing that well at the time. And Miami seemed in the second half to fold up their tents.
Right.
Say we've gotten this far.
They absolutely quit in that game.
So we've gotten this far. Let's go. But if I'm Mark Richt, I know that we overachieved last year. No matter. But as you say, the last thing people remember
is that
game. When
they don't remember the bowl game.
They totally destroyed.
They didn't bother watching the bowl game. They just remember that.
Yeah.
They had a bad day that day, but it's hard to have had a worse week than Papa John Schnatter, or now soon to be deposed John Schnatter.
So what do you rename the stadium?
It's going to be called Cardinal Stadium until some benefactor puts their name on it. He's no longer the chairman at Papa John's. He's no longer on the board of trustees at Louisville. They had his name taken off of the stadium, and I'm pretty sure that it's affecting a lot of their sales right now, despite the fact that their garlic butter sauce that they have on the side of their pizza is one of the greatest creations in the history of the world. However, the man is kind of racist.
But, what was the sauce you liked?
The garlic butter sauce on the side?
Well, see, maybe he should have put that in his mouth instead of opening it. But see, this is one of the things I try to tell people when you're trying to when you run a business or any corporation or whatever, the most difficult weapon that it seems that nobody can control nowadays is their tongue.
Yes.
Or their Twitter finger.
Yes.
Those two things will have you hung up on the yard arm before you can think.
Well, they just deleted a whole bunch of these fake Twitter people too. We lost a couple thousand Twitter bots on our followers. I didn't lose any, but we lost a couple.
Mm-hmm.
Twitter, man, is the devil. I'm convinced. I'm convinced that Jack or whoever is the guy who invented the Twitter, he is the devil incarnate.
Well, the thing about Twitter and the human brain is, for whatever reason, the human brain, when it goes to Twitter, thinks in this variety or in this order: ready, shoot, aim. Well,
ready, fire, aim. I had an owner who thought that way when I worked in radio, and let's just say I'm glad I work here and not there. Have a good weekend, guys.
See you in another steak.
We'll talk to you Monday.